Hello and welcome to the Voyage and the Return author interview series. My name is Nicolette Halladay, and today I am interviewing Stephanie Olivo. Hope I pronounced your last name
Perfect.
correctly. Okay, good. Yay. A co-author in the book The Voyage and the Return. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Nicolette, for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to visit with you about your chapter, about the work you're doing in the world, and really some of the things that are coming to light since the book, right? Sounds like some things are coming coming to fruition. So Stephanie is an American entrepreneur, and she lives in Tampa, Florida native. She's been a realtor since 2018. And in 2017, after the suicide of her husband and the overdose of her stepson, she closed the doors and started kind of exploring. And that's a lot of what your chapter is about, right, Stephanie?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. So I've been an agent. So I had a company with my late husband. He had started it, I think, in 1995 or something like that, and we had it for he had it for about 20 years. And then when I came around into the picture, I was working with him, kind of just helping him out. I was like, "No, you do your own thing. I'll do my own thing." Didn't want to work with him. And of course, the way that things go, ended up working with him and actually becoming part owner in the company. So around 2016 or so, actually in 2016, my stepson had been suffering already for a few years with addiction. So we were taking him to different therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists. And, the unfortunate part of mixing drugs, opioids and street drugs and stuff like that, kind of got the best of him. He had been clean for about a year or so prior to his overdose. So we had gotten him clean. He was working. He was doing really well. And I don't know what maybe kind of popped in his head. Maybe just, one last hurrah, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term. And he had gone in like kind of stints of not picking up the phone or not really communicating with us when he had his kind of I call him just his days. He suffered very much from depression, and kind of with this whole process of writing the chapter and going through all this healing, I learned that this was not a one-off thing. It actually something that progressed from the grandmother side. So it was actually Dirk's mom on that side that kind of, it was a common thing.
Yeah.
So it was maybe a Friday. We had heard from him. Saturday, didn't hear anything. Sunday, again, nothing. But it was nothing of concern for us. Monday came around. I had gone to the apartment. No answer. And the same thing with Dirk. And literally from Tuesday evening, late Tuesday evening, early Wednesday morning, Dirk had got violently ill. And I was like, what's going on? What's wrong? And he's like, I don't know. Something is not right. Something is not right. So, of course, Wednesday morning comes around. He's like, I'm going to go check on Kai. You go to the office and take the dogs and stuff. And we did that. And I was on a conference call with the team from Germany. So we imported stuff from Germany. So I was on the phone with them. And when I picked up the phone, it sounded like he was laughing because it was just this I don't know if it was like a yell or like a scream, like just this tone of voice that I had never heard of before in my life, never heard him say in my life. And then he just told me, he's like, Kai's dead. Like he just kept screaming it and screaming it. And I was like, oh, geez, like what are we going to do? Like what's going on? And I don't know if it's in that particular moment, or I think maybe kind of, when hindsight is always 20/20, you think about things and you're like, the situation, all that stuff. After that day, I knew that I had a very limited time with Dirk because they were just so incredibly tight. Like they talked 15 times a day and they worked in the same spot. You know what I mean? Like he would work in the warehouse, Dirk was in the office, or vice versa.
I can't even imagine. And I know so many people can relate to the battle of addiction for themselves or loved ones.
Yeah.
And so it's I can't imagine.
I think that's why I after that, and then literally was a year and 2 months to the day that Dirk took his life. It was a very hard situation basically from the outside looking in. Yes, I was kind of in the thick of it, in the family of it,
Yeah.
but I was literally an outsider because I didn't
Mhm.
know what addiction was really.
Mhm.
I've never witnessed it, so I didn't know how to kind of process that. Number one,
Yeah.
somebody that had severe depression and was really clinically depressed, I didn't know what that was
You
either.
didn't
You know what I mean?
you couldn't recognize, or I think I've heard so many people of stories who have gotten really blindsided,
Oh yeah.
by addiction, by different, mental illness, whether it's
Hmm.
depression or like especially from their loved ones when it's impossible to
Right.
really
Right.
understand or really the depths of how hard it can be, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And I was, I am 100%, admitting to I was one of those. I was,
Mhm.
for lack of a better term, I was ignorant to the whole situation because I didn't know what was really. I had a feeling what was going on, but I didn't know basically how to fix it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's
And so
probably one of
many
the biggest
people don't.
issues.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and so, in your chapter, you write so openly and vulnerably, and it really starts out the day that your husband committed suicide, right?
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of start with that because I had been toying with the idea of maybe writing a book or, because so many things just happened like literally boom, boom, boom right after the other. I
Mhm.
said, okay, there's something here that I need to do with whatever all of this situation is. I need to do something with it.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and it's kind of great because you had just talked to Jamie before, and she's really the reason.
Yes,
I
she's
blame
been a
everything
beacon
on
for
her.
you, right? Yes, and it's funny because I mentioned, as she was sharing about her own, journey
Mhm.
and losing her mother, and then shortly after her sister, and just the grief and, really starting to open up,
Yeah,
kind of to the spiritual world and finding support, and I mentioned to her that it's incredible when the people who will come into our lives during these times.
yeah. It's weird, it's crazy,
Mhm.
I think it's just timing, when you're ready to receive that help or that kind of push, it's
Yeah,
gonna come to you, whatever it is.
yeah.
I think you have to be very open to it. And when I first kind of started this whole healing, I was like, I'm not going to go to therapy. I'll be fine. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? It's like it was never a
Yep.
thought process. And I did try. I did try
Mhm.
group therapy, regular, therapy, like, the norms, if you will. But for whatever reason, it just did not resonate with me. I just didn't feel like, doing a crossword puzzle or something as my session, if you will.
Yeah.
And sometimes I didn't want to talk, and they would just kind of like push
Mhm.
a little bit. And I understand like that's their job, and I get that, and I respect that. But for me, it was just maybe I wasn't ready to kind of go into that, you know,
Yeah.
type of therapy or anything like that.
Mhm.
And then I had met Jamie, and then this all kind of started. But I
Progress.
was even asking her. I go, look, she had mentioned this a while ago. I think in maybe February or March, whenever I think she had spoken with you. And I go, yeah, that'd be interesting. That would be cool. That would be cool. And then she like asked me maybe one or two times after that, and I was like, nah, maybe I won't do it. And I was like, okay, well that time has passed, the deadline passed or whatever. And of course, it came up again.
Mhm.
Um, and she's like, I think you should do it. And I go, what am I going to write? She's like, tell your story. I go, but really, what is my story? I was like, it's not just this day. It's not just, Kai. It's not just everything. It's like, I go, I have a bigger story to tell. I just don't really know what it is. And then I just started writing, and I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to talk about the day of how everything went down and kind of let people just into my life.
Yeah, and this
And
is really
it's
just a glimpse, right? And a much
such a yeah,
bigger, more complicated dynamics, and you're a very, full person with experiencing a lot of things, and this is just a
mhm,
chapter. So,
yeah.
we didn't get to hear all of those things, but, in your chapter, what do you hope, the reader receives? What do you hope, the right person or just someone who needs to hear it, what's the message that you hope that they receive from it?
I think for me, really, it's and it sounds so cheesy and maybe so corny, but I think it's hope. It's hope
Mhm.
that
I don't think it's
Just because all of this stuff happens in your life. And I think we have to kind of change the narrative of how we say this, this happened to me, that happened to me. It didn't happen to you, it happened in your life. It's a
yeah.
part of your life, absolutely, but it's not
Mhm.
your entire life.
It's
You know
not
what I
defining
mean?
you.
It's not defining you, correct.
Yeah.
And it took me a very long time to kind of grasp that and understand
Mhm.
that. And honestly, I think writing the chapter really kind of helped me kind of navigate all of that,
Mm.
honestly.
That's incredible. I think also it's defining us in a lot of ways, these
Mhm.
challenging moments, but what I have found and having countless conversations and hearing so many people's stories is it's not necessarily the tragedy that defines us, it's the becoming after.
Correct.
It's the healing
Correct.
and the shedding and then the becoming, and that's a choice we get to make.
Absolutely.
That comes down to us. So, anyone who, finds themselves in a similar situation or dealing with that, what's the best piece of advice you would give them in that moment?
I think for me, and it's interesting that you say that because I listen to a lot of podcasts, a lot of different people and healers and mentors and writers and such. And I can't remember his name, but he has been on a couple of podcasts that I had listened to. And he had mentioned, he goes, we have to come to terms with when someone dies. And we
Mm,
can't say, we can always say, I'm sorry for your loss because, us from the outside looking in, we're sorry that you lost that person in your life. But the reality is that there's no loss. I
mhm,
think for me, I gained so much more with the passing of Kai and Dirk, and more of kind of understanding of who I was and who I am,
mhm.
who I'm really meant to be, kind of thing,
Yeah,
and not just feeling lost.
yeah,
I think that's one of the biggest things is you know someone dies, we have to kind of say that word, and yes,
yeah.
they died, they passed away, but we didn't lose anything. They're physically
Mhm,
not here, yes, but we gained so much from them being in our lives, the impact that they
mhm.
had in our lives, whatever the situation is, whether it's traumatic or, they just, passed from old age. We tend to kind of forget everything that we learned because
Mm.
someone has passed away.
I
And I
really
think that's
love
probably
that.
one
I
of the
think
important things.
and we lose people in different ways,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Marriages end, friendships come to an end,
Correct.
business partnerships collapse, like, there's
Correct.
kind of death or,
Hmm.
the end of, relationships or situations in our life
Yeah.
promised. That's
Yeah.
promised.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's funny
and
because a lot of people say, oh, divorce is so much different than someone passing. I'm like, honestly, yes, it is. It's a bigger difference, sure, but you're also grieving a life that you thought you were going to have,
that is the big piece
you
of it,
know?
right? Yes,
Mhm.
and I think it's so valuable to say, look at this broader context
Mhm.
and what you've gained, from not only having them in your life, but from losing them,
For
because
sure.
even though it's hard to say and it probably is not, like, politically correct, there
Yeah,
is so much opportunity for your own personal growth when you're experiencing trauma,
for sure.
tragedy, those kinds of things, and, I hope that as people pick up this book, and read your chapter and the other chapters, I hope what people receive from it is the knowing and understanding that, for one thing, life is seasonal, like, change is promised,
For
and
sure.
we get to guide pieces of this journey. We get to be
Mhm.
open. We get to decide how we're going to heal. We get to, we can decide it's all over, and it will be. We can sit on
Mhm.
the couch and that will be the existence that we live in
Yeah,
forever. Or we can decide that today's another day and we're going to slowly start putting one foot in front of the other.
for
Um,
sure.
but I hope they hear that message. And I hope they also hear the message that they are so supported, that people, angels, spirit guides,
Yeah.
God, the universe, there is always a support system that is so strong and,
For sure.
you know, eh, what do I want to say? Surrounding you. Um,
Mhm.
and
And a
when
lot of times when things like this happen, whether it's, it's divorce or it's
Mhm.
death or whatever it is, you and a lot of us, especially women, we're very, how do you say, we're like, okay, well, let's not talk about that because, we don't want to, put a bad thing in the conversation, or you can't really
We don't
ask
want
her
to be
about that.
negative. We want to,
Yeah, don't
right?
ask
And
her
we're
about
so used
Dirk,
to
or
being
don't
the
do
ones
this,
that are,
don't do
yeah.
that. Yeah, and I don't believe that.
Mm-mm.
Sometimes even till this day, and it's going to be 5 years next week. My family still says, hey, I was thinking a picture came up on Facebook of me and Dirk, and I wanted to share it, but I wasn't sure. I said, share it, absolutely share
Please.
it. I go,
Yes.
he is always going to be around. Kai is always going to be
Mhm.
around. Our loved ones are always going to be around.
Mm.
Some of them are just not physically here right now. But I love the
Mhm.
fact that you're still thinking about him, still loving him, and still wanting
Yeah,
to share that. Like, absolutely, like share it.
please.
Yes, the
Yes.
way that he passed sucks, you
Mhm.
know, but it's remembering them and honoring them. It's
And
it's
all
it's
of them,
just, yeah,
right? Because I
yeah,
think a lot of times, especially when it is like a tragic, kind of death or something that is just that's how they're remembered. That's not even
mhm,
that's not who they are. That's
yeah.
not what
And
they
even myself, for a long time, I said that he had a heart attack because
Mm,
of the stigma of
mm,
suicide. And I was like, no, he was, for me, he was bigger than life. And for a lot of my family, he was bigger than life.
mm,
And I think with Kai, the same thing. Dirk would tell me, he's like, tell him that he had heart problems and he could, he
mhm.
passed away just in his sleep. I said, okay, I'll do that, because that was what he wanted to do to honor his son.
The
And
stigma
then,
and
not
shame
even thinking
around it.
about it, I did the
Mhm,
same thing to him, because I was like,
mm,
I can't have, him say that he had suicide, he committed suicide. Like,
mm.
that's like heavy,
Yeah.
but I very quickly, probably about a year or so, a little bit later, I said, what am I doing? Like, I have to be honest with myself, and I have to be
Yeah.
honest with everybody.
Mm.
Like, what
I'm
what am I
so
really
glad.
doing? Hmm.
I'm so glad you got to that point because, um, and it kind of leads me into, so if you haven't picked up a copy of The Voyage and the Return,
Yeah,
it's available in paperback on Amazon. I'll make sure to add the links. And we're preparing for a book club, and really an opportunity, for the contributors to come and, deepen into their chapters and what they wrote, but also for the other members to share their own personal truth, their own
yeah,
personal stories. And I honestly believe that more people who are honest about where they've been or where they're at, where they're going, where they see themselves going, it's really an invitation for other people to show up authentically. And just
absolutely.
life is a full smorgasbord,
Yeah,
of a spectrum of emotions and experiences, and to think we have to be in this live in this facade of everything's just fine,
yeah, yeah.
is it's unpractical, but it's toxic.
Hmm.
And when you can start really exploring the depths of what you've experienced, the pain, but also the success and the celebrations and all of it, that life's it's there's it's a it's a lot more. There's more depth, there's more
For sure. And
enjoyment
I
and
think
more
that's one of the most important things. If I say this to every woman and every man, like whoever, something that happens to you that's so heavy, and so that really kind of shifts your perspective in your life. Talk about it, and talk about it some more. One of the things that I started doing was video recording myself, just talking to myself. And I think
Mm.
that's probably one of the hardest things to do, because I was like, what am I doing? Like, what is going on? Like, and it just, like, things just started coming out. I said, oh, okay, so this is what therapy should be like.
So this is it, yeah.
So this is what I'm supposed to be tapping into. Okay,
Mhm.
I get it now.
That's really
It's
valuable
just
though,
that,
and sometimes
little kind of tidbits.
start where you are and follow your intuition, follow your instinct, because
100%.
I think a lot of times we might get the idea and then like, "Oh, no, that" and
Mhm.
you had the idea and you did it and you found it to be helpful. So, definitely, like, be open to receiving and following those inklings.
Yeah, because you
I
never
think
know who you're gonna touch, and even if it's just healing yourself, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why I really did all of this. It wasn't really for anybody else.
yeah,
If one person gets some kind of like, help with it, I'm by all means, that's awesome. But that's not why I did it. I
yeah,
was really, it's, selfishly, it's for myself. And I'm learning so much about who I really want to be and what I really want to put out there, and just kind of be an advocate for people who literally are the outside looking in and just like, okay, what do I do? I'm not a therapist, I'm not a doctor, but I'm somebody who lived, 11 years, with these gentlemen,
yeah,
and experienced a lot more that I could ever have imagined,
yeah.
good, bad, and ugly. So
Yeah, I think so something that you mentioned is you said oh, I drew a blank, sorry. I had it in
that's
my head
okay.
and oh, let me see if I can find it again. That oh, it's gone. I'm
It's
gonna move
okay.
on. I'm
It'll
sorry.
it'll come back.
It
It's
was there and then boom.
fine.
So, okay. So, um, it sounds like a big part of the benefit of this project and working and something that you just really valued was the cathartic experience in sharing your story and writing your story and thinking about it and reflecting it. And I think something that a lot of people, especially around the trauma, never get a chance to really properly
Mhm.
pay reverence to those times in those moments in their life. So was that your favorite part of the experience, or share a little bit about what your favorite part of participating in this project
For
was?
me, it was more of not only kind of getting it out there, because that was also very weird because, talking about it to somebody on a non-recorded situation,
Yeah.
just having a conversation with somebody who has maybe had an experience or something like that, maybe something similar, is completely different than actually putting pen to paper and having it out there kind of forever, if you will.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a totally
Yes.
different dynamic and it's a
Yep.
totally different feeling as well. For me,
Absolutely.
I was like, do I want to do this? Do I want to put that out there?
It brings up a
Um, you
lot.
know, it brings up a lot. And I even had to call his brother because I
Mm.
literally felt guilty. I was like, okay, yeah, this is my story, but it's like, I'm not the only one in the story. Like, I want
Yep.
to involve them enough to be like, with all due respect, like I feel like I have to talk about this, not only my Dirk's story, but Kai's story. I want to make sure that you guys are okay with it.
Yeah.
And, I got a huge, absolutely hell yes. Like, their stories need to be told. And then for me, I was not surprised. I had a feeling that they were going to say that. But of course, whenever you get a yes or no question, you're 75% no, 25% yes. I was like, okay, how am I going to handle the fact that he's going to tell me no?
Yeah. What
How am
happens
I
if
going to
he
loop
says
that around and
no
tell me
or
no?
has some
Yeah,
or even says yes, but you get like a kind of a,
hesitation on it. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
I'm
So
so
for me,
glad
it
that
was it was
they saw
definitely
the
that.
value.
Yeah, it was definitely that, and also just, listening to the other ladies' stories. I mean, just reading their stories, and I think that's why I wanted to start the live. It's not just, to talk about my stuff, but to kind of figure out, like, how they got to their story, like, why they wanted to do that chapter, or what
Yeah.
was it that, kind of, put them in that kind of direction, or what happened. A lot
Yeah.
of people, because the chapter is only so much, we only get, like you said, a little snippet
I
of
glimpse.
whatever they want to share, and
Yeah.
it's great to have that context in the background and just kind of going on that, and sometimes going on different tangents, which is
Yeah,
always
I think the like the incredible part of a multi-author book is that, so many different people are sharing their
yeah,
experience around a certain theme, and you really get different perspectives, and anyone can read through the stories and see themselves in these things, these
absolutely.
situations, either now or things they've experienced. And you really start seeing like this theme that threads through, all of the stories
Mhm.
of resiliency and the transformation um and hope
Yeah,
and inspiration, and just that to me feels like such an important piece of the book in its entirety,
for
because
sure.
people will understand if they're right in the if sometimes when you are in the depths of the situation,
Mhm.
it's hard to see the hope.
Oh,
It's almost
absolutely.
impossible.
Yeah.
So I hope that anyone who reads this book feels the camaraderie, feels the support, and maybe get some guidance on how different people were able to move through some really, really difficult
For
situations.
sure, and I think that's kind of why I titled, so I have a blog and I have a website and stuff.
Yeah, share a
It's
little bit
called
about that. Let's share a little
Yeah.
bit about the work that you're doing and, kind of what exciting projects you have coming up or that are in the
Yeah.
works that you wanna talk about.
So the reason I bring this up is because, I was trying to figure out maybe a title because I wanted to do a podcast and I wanted to do, a blog and just kind of like get, stuff out there. And I was trying to figure out, and I was, Warrior kept on coming up. I was like, it's not really, that's so cheesy. Like, I can't do that. And then I was like, I go, maybe, something else. And I was like, no, everybody has this. And my sister actually came up with, she goes, DC. And I'm like, huh, what are you talking about? She's like, you were in the medical field because that's what we did in the past as medical device distribution. She's like, DC means discontinued. And it's also his initials, Dirk Christian. And it's
Mm.
just like, I'm like, yeah, discontinued. Now what? And she goes, that's your title.
Now what? Oh my gosh, I
So
love it.
that's how that kind of came up. I'm like,
So that's your
okay,
podcast, it sounds like?
that's going to be the
That's
podcast,
gonna be the
discontinued.
podcast today.
Because I didn't want it just to talk about grief and healing. Yes, it's a part of my journey, and I do want to kind of touch on that. But I want to touch on, exactly like the book does, the
Yeah,
voyage and the return. It's the path to self-discovery. And I think that's
yeah.
the most important thing is everyone's path to self-discovery and realizing, okay, that life is discontinued. Now what do I do? Okay,
Now what do I
there is
do?
kind of
Yes.
hope at the end of the tunnel type of situation.
Mhm.
So I think that's kind of why I wanted to kind of do that theme because there's honestly, like you said, sometimes when you're in the midst of it, you're like, what do I do? Like, what am
Yeah,
I supposed to do? Like, what? There's no playbook. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like, if somebody dies or if somebody divorces you, like, what do you do now?
And
There's no
everyone's
playbook.
path is
Everyone's
different. Everyone
Correct.
experiences it
Correct.
differently, and, I think it's such a powerful I love the podcast I love the name of the podcast and the theme of it because not only are you gonna be giving, the audience an opportunity to who maybe are going through those kinds of situations, but also just the guests, it sounds like you might be having some guests possibly?
That's the plan. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
an opportunity to really voice their story and share their experience. I think it's so cathartic to be honest and just be that person who shows up and says, "This is how what I experienced and this is how I moved through it."
Mhm.
It's an empowering opportunity.
Yeah, and it's sometimes, and I understand, sometimes it's also hard to see, you know, I went through something really hard, look at me now. Because I was in the same situation. I was like, I go, there's no, like, if you would have told me 5 years ago or 4 years ago, hey,
Yeah,
Steph, you're going to write a chapter in a book. You're going to meet
yeah,
some amazing women. They're going to push you to do this. They're going to push you to do that. And I'm like, yeah, right. Like, no way. There's no way.
that's not gonna happen. Yeah,
Because it's the same thing as like, you're literally like, you're put in a box. You're like, okay, great. Like, what direction do I go? Like,
mhm.
what next? So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think it's so important too that it's a progression.
it
That the
is.
becoming part is such a progression, that life's a progression, and, it's really the journey that makes it a really rich experience, and that means the full spectrum of it, right?
For sure.
So how can people okay, so you have the podcast, what else, exciting things do you have coming
Yeah,
up?
so the podcast is coming to be determined. We're just kind of finishing up some things. The blog is on Instagram and on Facebook. It's discontinued now what or DCNW.
We'll make
The
sure to put
website
the
is
link.
also I'll get you the links and DCNW.info is the website. And I'm not really selling anything per se, just kind of like talking about things that have happened. But I did want to include not only access to the book, but access to different things that I used during my journey that I felt worked for me.
Yes,
Something that could maybe help somebody else, whether it's crystals, whether it's cards or whatever it is, things that I have used and places that I've gone that really helped me, just to kind of share, just put some different
Yeah,
perspective into that healing journey. Because we're
I
always
love
going to
it.
be healing, we're
Yeah,
always going to be grieving. That's something that never goes away. Like you're not
yeah,
going to get over it. That's not going to
no.
happen, and you're just going to learn different steps and different tools. Um, to move forward in your life. You're going to
There might
always
be
have
more
pain.
space between it. It might
Hmm.
not feel so
Right.
raw, but then some days something might happen and it, brings
Correct.
things back up again. And
Yeah.
life is a progression. So what we're experiencing today, I mean, there's promise to be different things that happen down the
Yeah,
road. So
for
we
sure. And I
all
think
need
that's,
resources.
yeah.
And I think the more we can talk about, what works for us and just share openly
Hmm.
about our own journey, it really makes it more accessible for someone else.
For sure.
So I'll make sure to put the links. Anyone who's watching, get the book, read Stephanie's chapter. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review on Amazon
Yes.
and share any feedback you have about Stephanie or the other chapters in the book. We love those reviews, and it makes us, so happy to hear the readers' perspectives. And we'll keep you posted on the book club that's coming up. Like I mentioned,
Yes.
it's going to be an invitation for people to join in this conversation, which it sounds like Stephanie is also providing those opportunities on her social media channels to really join in the conversation. So make sure to check her out and
Yes.
connect
Please
with
join us.
her. Say hello, and I'm sure that she would love to have a message or whatever. So thank you all. In closing, is there anything else that you wanted to add, Stephanie?
No, I just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity. Yeah, I'm excited for what's to come.
Me too. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, I'm excited for what's to come too. So that's all for us.
Awesome. Thank
Thanks,
you,
everyone.
Nicolette. Bye, everyone.